Whereas this operator is kind of not a jack of all trades, but a jack of many trades.
One thing I'm not a fan of is, again, from an artistic direction, I think it looks quite bland. Again, maybe I'm being a little bit too harsh.
You had no NA team make it to the grand final, no APAC teams in the finals. The viewership itself was not amazing, and you had a double region, Brazil of all regions, to be in the grand final. It just was the recipe to just be a pretty mid event, to be honest.
What episode number are we up to? Come on.
I want to say 14.
14.
Am I right?
It is indeed episode 14 of the Siege Show, presented by Jake and Guzz. A big one here, of course, as we always have on this particular show. A lot to get through.
Yeah.
We've got, obviously, new season, new patch notes to talk about. The grand final of the Atlanta Major, of course, concluded, an all-Brazilian finale. We'll very quickly touch on something, though, for our own show, which is a slight change, tweak, restructure to our Patreon, which is hopefully going to make our Discord a little bit more accessible. So we're basically making it that for $2.50, you can get access to the Discord now. So hopefully, if you guys watching want to sort of join in, it's been a really good community. We're opening that up a little bit for everyone involved. All right, moving on to the main show, though. We've got, of course, new season Operation Deep Freeze. Which is a cool looking, cool name. I like it. I think it's good. Obviously, with that comes a new operator, Tubarão. It's going to be one that is going to be a bit of a tongue twister. New map, of course, Lair, or as I already like to call it, the Batman Cave.
Okay, well, what do you want to talk about first? The operator, the name, the map? How are we guiding this conversation?
Well, I mean, obviously, we'll talk about the operator first. I think that's always going to be the biggest part of any kind of reveal in a new season, right? Is going to be the operator. So 2 health, 2 speed, defender, and the biggest part about it, and we were chatting quite heavily before we started the podcast, the Zoto canister, which is incredibly flexible and versatile. And I think that's the main strength of this operator. And for me, I think where his strength comes from and why he's going to be, I think, a very picked operator.
Yeah, I think the last couple of operators we've had, like Solus, Azami, etc., have been quite powerful and excelling at one very specific thing. Solus gaining information, Azami aiding with, creation of line of sight and denying line of sight for the attack. Whereas this operator is kind of not a jack of all trades, but a jack of many trades. The ability to stall out walls and bring, probably Bandit and Kaid into play a lot more now, make them far more effective. There's also the ability to flex on the roam a little bit more. The ability to deny like claymores, etc., opens up that pathing for flanks. So there's a lot of different synergies. You've also got the ability to throw it on verticality and see the footprints to synergize with like a pulse, or even just nitro him yourself because you have that gadget alongside the proxies. So I don't think that this operator is going to necessarily be overpowered overall, but will excel, especially in the hands of, flexible players. And with the defense being in a pretty good spot at the moment as a whole, I think there's definitely going to be room for this operator to be picked and maybe even banned, especially on some objectives or maps.
Yeah, I think one thing when we were talking about it off air that you brought up for me was the anti-rush. Right, and obviously for attackers and going fast and trying to attack sites, this is something he can kind of slow down quite literally with his freeze and the proxy alarm. So in combination, you can really stall out an attack. And I also kind of look at it and say, okay, well, if you're bringing him for that particular reason and the attacking team, say, doesn't play fast, they don't go for the rush and things, they stall themselves out themselves, then he can switch up and say, okay, well, instead of looking to slow down with my canisters, I'm going to find information with my canisters. I'm going to play a little bit more of a hard point and anchor position. So you can kind of be very flexible. Even if you don't, say, bring the nitros for that particular round, you can still flex then back into that sort of lockdown role. So I think that's going to be his strength. I mean, as you said, he's not like the jack of all trades, but he's the jack of many, and he can do quite a lot of different roles. I mean, you saw it basically in the reveal video where they were comparing sort of the groups that you would kind of put him in and associate him with, and it was like 3 different groups that essentially he fits into. So would you double down? Would you have him with a pulse? I'm not too sure, but I think that from what I've seen and the fact that he's got nitros himself, which means he can play off of his own footsteps from the canisters, I think already puts him in a really good position. And as I was saying to you before as well, when you think about pulse, you've got the cardiac sensor and you're having to look to get the information. By the time you put that away, the animation, pull the nitrocell out, rip it, throw it, Whereas in this instance, you can throw the canister, wait for the footsteps. You've already got the Nitrocell ripped in your hand, ready to go. So you can play off of your own canister really, really well. So I think he's going to be very strong. I also think this is another really strong defender. And one of your concerns very much is that maybe we're seeing a lot of this power creep going towards defense continuing here in Siege, especially coupled with the frag grenade changes we'll touch on shortly. But I think we need to start seeing some better attacking operators.
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting overarching decision. Before we touch on that, I just will quickly say that I think this operator does not only in isolation bring, fun gameplay by himself, but I think the synergy is going to be interesting, right? Like, it brings Bandit into play, especially with Vertinade's pretty much dead in the water now, so that's going to be super exciting. You think of like a CCTV wall. Is that site now actually going to be pretty defendable with him? I think it might be now, so that's going to be interesting. Also, equally brings Maverick more into play if you don't want to be stalled out hard breach, so that's just something to keep in mind. But yeah, in terms of like the attack defense split at the moment, it's felt like there's been that discussion continuing to generate over the last year, especially with these powerful operators on defense being introduced, whereas on the attacking side probably not as much. And is this going to sort of be a bit of a tipping point now? I'm seeing a lot of discussion about this, but the big counterpoint I would say to it all is, what is the number we're looking for? Like, is the goal to be 50-50 attack defense in Siege? Is that what we want? I don't know, because the thing is, Siege has never been 50-50. This game since day one, regardless of the meta, regardless of the state, like what year we're in or whatever, it has always been defender sided. And we used to see those stats publicly. They used to be published on the website. They're not anymore. But we can see it reflected in things like the Atlanta Major, right? Like, it is just defender-sided. I think there may have been like 1 or 2 maps that were very close or maybe slightly attacker-sided. But the game is defender-sided. How do you relieve that? I don't know. I guess introducing more powerful attacking operators is probably going to help. But I just think the nature of the game, I don't have a problem with it leaning a little bit towards defense. But that's probably looking at the numbers too much. It's also about the player experience, right? You want to be giving the tools and opportunities for good attacking teams and players to excel, and probably at the moment those tools are getting a little bit limited, whereas defensively you kind of have a lot of powerful operators to do a lot of different things and to express yourself, whereas on the attack it's getting quite challenging.
Yeah, does it need to be even? Does it need to be 50-50? Is there anything wrong necessarily with it being favored towards the defense? Because at the end of the day, you get to play both sides, right? So you both, you think about 5v5, you both get to play defense, you both get to play attack, and it means it does put a bit more onus on doing well on your defensive side, and then can you steal a couple of rounds on the attack? That narrative is something that I think is totally fine from both the competitive standpoint and also from a more casual standpoint, whether you're just playing ranked or quick match or whatever, right? So I don't think it needs to be 50-50. I've always been, and it's probably one thing I've always liked about Siege is that you can say, you look at a particular map like Oregon and you say, okay, well, defender side, so you want at least like a 4-2 half. That always kind of sets you a goal, and it makes also following the half a little bit more palatable, because you can say, well, if it ended up as, say, 2-4 to the attack, that one team's doing better than the other, not just because of the scoreboard, but because of the side included, right? They've done really well on the attack side, so therefore they're really in front. And then how many times do we say, well, it's Oregon defense, they go up 4-2 on the defensive side? Well, it's like, yeah, they're up 4-2, and that's great on the scoreboard, but it doesn't really mean a whole lot because they've just kind of gotten the job done. Now that they've got to go and attack themselves, and they've got to win tertiaries and all of these things. So it does mean that from a storytelling perspective of the match, from an esport perspective, from a competitive perspective, that it's a little bit more in-depth outside of just, one score's bigger than the other score, yep, and they're pulling ahead like that. And it's the same in a lot of other games. I think even like you could look at Counter-Strike 2 and say, well, certain maps might be more considered T-side or CT side, so therefore you're expected to do a little bit better in a particular half based on what side you start on. And even technically in League of Legends, they got blue side, red side.
I was actually thinking about that on the drive here. I'm like, Siege lives in a bit of a bubble, but for those who don't know, Worlds, which is like the global event for League of Legends that's been happening, I don't know if you know the win rate on blue side, but it is like fucking insanely blue-sided.
Yep.
And that's like such a crazy thing to think about, because it feels like so simple and arbitrary, but it's like, how the fuck does the side you start on become so impactful? So look, I don't think Siege in terms of that respect of like attack defense is too wildly unbalanced. Like if we were having like the defensive be as like blue-sided as we're seeing in Worlds, it would be like World War fucking 3 in this community. So personally, maybe I'm a bit of a masochist, and I've had this discussion before when I've been playing ranked and stuff. I personally don't mind attack being a little bit more challenging than defense. Like inherently, you're the one that has to show initiative and has to be the one making plays.
Yep.
And I would kind of like the game a little bit less, especially if it was attacker-sided, because it wouldn't feel as rewarding. Now, again, that goes back to my previous point, right? We should still be seeing, you know, attacking operators come out that have a place in the meta, and we haven't really had that for a lot of these newer releases. So that's something that needs to be looked at and adjusted. But as long as the attack does have the tools available and gets more tools going forward, I don't think we have to see the game be 50-50. And I don't really think it ever will be, because you're always going to have primary defensive sites. Only once a map becomes old and shit to play, like a coastline or whatever, does it become attacker sided. And we know that's just not fun. And everyone then whinges about the rush meta. Yep. So I think the game's in an okay spot, and we still need to see this season played out. We haven't even fucking jumped into the new season, right? I think it's going to be challenging. I think it's going to be tough, and the attack's going to have to adjust quite a bit. So hopefully that's monitored, and heading into next year we see changes.
Yeah, we've kind of diverted a little bit. We'll close on the new operator. Sorry. Good or bad? Good.
New operator, I think generally is good. I think if maybe the size needs to be adjusted a little bit. I've heard that was a lot of pro feedback. The size is too big. So look at that. Every other metric seems pretty good. Maybe the time could be a bit smaller as well. But again, we haven't seen it played out. I think it looks fun and it's versatile. I think it's a good operator. Yeah.
Yep. All right. The new map, Lair, better known as the Batman Cave, has come out as well. I haven't spent time in it. You have. From my first glance in terms of the season reveal, looking at it, I'm going to be completely subjective on this. I think one thing I'm not a fan of is, again, from an artistic direction, I think it looks quite bland. Again, maybe I'm being a little bit too harsh. I'd love to just see a little bit more vibrance. I'm not asking for Valorant. I'm not asking for pink everywhere, but just a tiny bit more vibrance. Just make it seem a little bit more colorful and lifeful, because it reminds me a bit of Nighthaven Labs. And I think back to some of the early maps, you go and play like Coastline, and it's a very vibrant map. Like, it's a very nice looking map to play on. The rooms are very distinct. They're all very colorful. And just using that as an example, there's plenty of others, don't get me wrong, not just Coastline, but using that as an example. Whereas I look at Nighthaven Labs and I look at Lair, and I just think it's like they've got this one monotone color brush, and it's just like everything's gray and a dull brown. Like, just make it a little bit more lifeful. But I love the location, the fact it's inside of a cave. I think that looks great. I think when you're actually outside of the map and looking around, that looks amazing. In terms of how it's going to play, I've got no idea. On your thoughts on that? You've obviously roamed around a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, we could briefly touch on like the new onboarding tools as well, right? We'll probably jump into T-Hunt. Getting removed is another discussion in a bit, but I actually jumped in, like I used the tool, I ran around, I started to learn the maps, started to learn some of the angles, the call outs, whatever. And I think from floor to floor, and they mentioned it in the reveal, each floor looks quite distinct, but I would probably agree with you that some of the rooms muddy a little bit. Outside, the exterior, fucking incredible. I would say in terms of the setting and the way it looks and the atmosphere, it's the best. It is the best in the game by far. Yep. It looks absolutely insane. There's a bug in like the free cam at the moment in replays where it's like a black box, so they need to fix it. But like seriously, it'll look so good, like in esports and stuff, which I think this map could probably get to. But yeah, some of the rooms muddy, and there's also there's like this long corridor that sort of wraps around the top side of the map. And for me, that felt super like confusing, claustrophobic, felt very like difficult to distinguish where I kind of was in the map. So I found that a little bit confusing. But I think there's other interesting like dynamics in the map. There's like, you know, outside balconies, there's an exterior breach. It follows the map philosophy we've seen in the last couple of years, right? With like triple stairs. You think back to like OG Hereford had one staircase. We had like OG Club, which had like kind of like two staircases in a hybrid sense. And we've seen over time that because the skill ceiling of players has risen and there needs to be more opportunities for attack and defense to maneuver around the map, that three staircases is kind of like the normality at the moment. You think of like Consulate, for example. So they've employed that same mentality here. And there's a decent mix of like soft floor rooms in the center surrounded by harder floored rooms around. Gee, that was a mouthful. So I think it's okay. It doesn't have the overloading of really small, tight, compact rooms from Consulate, at least not as many. And I think it strikes a balance, because as much as everyone loves to rant and rave about how the old maps that had like 3 rooms of floor is amazing, you give it a year and the attack works out how to play it, and it just turns into a shit fest like Coastline. I'll always use that as my example. Even old Consulate, it just wasn't particularly fun to play on either side because of just how cheesy it got. So I think they've struck a balance where it's not probably as to the other extreme like Consulate, where it feels a little bit too compact. The volume of the rooms has been reduced, but there's enough there, I think, to provide opportunities, and it has kind of, in my eyes, a lot of the like box checks that maps have. And in fact, I would even say from a more casual perspective that it, from what I could tell and my limited play time, and they mentioned in the reveal as well, there's been a big emphasis on like denying spawn peaks and stuff as well. Like the spawns feel very protected and safe, and you can actually have an impact in the rounds, which is also really good as well.
Yeah. All right. So it's a little bit difficult, obviously, to fully understand how it's going to play out because we need to see the pros on it. We need to see it in pro play or even just in play in general.
I will say this now. You can clip it and ship it. This map should be at 6 Invitational, and I think it will be.
Okay.
Big call to make, but I genuinely think it's all right. Like, but if Nighthaven can make it, this map can make it.
Are they going to change the map pool going into SI, or is that something they would change after SI? I mean, I guess it's not like there's calls beforehand now, right?
Fucking get rid of Cafe. Just get rid of it.
Yeah, we'll see. I don't know. That's a big call to make, not because I think the map itself doesn't warrant being in there, but just more so the logistics of changing the map pool in this particular like comp season.
Well, the thing is, it'd probably take a full ranked season to get proper play time and feedback.
I think it would come in after SI.
And then if you were to make the call after that, then you're getting really close to SI. So I think it probably could and should be in, but realistically, it probably won't be.
From a logistics
but
point
stage
of view.
1, 2024?
Yeah, it should be in then. I'd agree with you.
I'd be shocked if it isn't.
Moving on with more of the reveal, the marketplace beta. There's not too much to really go on about this because they kept it pretty hush-hush, but just the idea of what the marketplace could be. This is a topic that we had on many weeks ago about what it could look like if you bring sort of skins in the skin market of like Counter-Strike in towards Siege. Again, they've kind of announced it without really going into too much detail surrounding it. We're not too sure what it would look like, especially when it is all finalized. But I think just the idea of it actually coming in opens up this whole new avenue for the game, and this new sort of market for the game. And you think about really skins in general and trading NFTs using that. Obviously, that's kind of fallen off a little bit, but it's something that Siege hasn't really been able to get into despite being in a genre that has these kind of things. Now it's starting to think, okay, what can we do? And you think about sort of like just, it would have been perfect to have all this time. Imagine rare skins from like 2017, 2018 or something that you could trade. They would have increased in value. They would have been hard to get. Those kind of things could be traded and sold, and value go up and down. And it adds an extra element, extra layer, and probably brings other people into the game for different reasons.
Yeah, so you can actually register for this beta. I don't know when it goes live. I would assume probably early next year. The only real details we know is that transactions are done with credits. So R6 credits, and there's a 10% market fee. Now, we don't know if there's like peer-to-peer trading, because we know if there is, that would open up the grey market and third-party marketplaces like you see with CS. So I doubt that would probably be what it is. I'm assuming it's just like an anonymous marketplace. You list an item, you have a price or auction or whatever, and it links it with other buyers. That's what I assume. There's also a lot of discussion about what is and isn't tradable. That the rumors and the leaks seem to suggest that items bought with cash are not tradable because they were open to exploits and like dupe glitches, whereas items that were bought with credits will be tradable. There's also rumors about whether or not you can trade like old esports items, perhaps because of like the share agreements and the pilot program agreements. Maybe you can't. I really hope you can, because there's a lot of like OG pro items that I want, like the Pentaskid and like shit like that. So hopefully, so yeah, it's a lot of unknowns at the moment, but I will say like people give a shit about this. Like I made a tweet the other day, and it was basically saying like, what do you guys think will be the rarest items? And I just gave a couple of ideas what I think it could be. That tweet, as a recording, I posted 22 hours ago. It's up to 93,000 views and has like 600 likes, which for a small Twitter account like mine is pretty wild. And like heaps of people commenting about like the stuff they want to buy and like what they're happy to sell, and like everyone getting excited that they'll be millionaires and all of this shit. Like this seems to be pretty exciting for the community. It's also on desktop, so like it doesn't gatekeep anyone. If you have a computer, if you have a computer and you play a console, you can get onto it. So I think it's super exciting. I just hope the implementation is good. Like if they make some dog shit system where it's like FIFA price ranges and shit like that to like really lock it down, I don't think it's going to get as much as it could. I really hope they go back and fix these items that may not be sellable, to make them sellable, because like a 10% cut, Ubisoft, mate, you are going to make trillions off this.
But it's credits for credits, right? Am I wrong? Can you pull out for real money?
Like, so as it's been explained, I believe it's just credits for credits, and there's no real money. Like I said though, if there's direct peer-to-peer trading with friends, which a developer actually kind of talked a little bit about, but again, it was very cloudy. So I don't know if that will actually be a thing. You open that up, you get a grey market overnight with bot accounts and whatever, and you'll have like a buff for R6, which I'm not going to say is good or bad because I have no idea what the TOS is, but
that's the interesting thing about it, because like then you're just basically modeling Steam and what Valve have kind of done, right? Because like if you actually think about it, realistically, the way the skins work in say Counter-Strike is it's built for trading on Steam. Like it's meant to be the Steam credits, and you buy it on Steam and then you get Steam credits. You're not actually meant to make money off of CS skins, for example. That was never the intention, but because of the fact that you can just trade manually, then that opens up external and third-party websites that allow you to actually make money, lose money at the moment based on the skin market. But so that'll be, I guess, the biggest factor then is maybe the marketplace for Siege will start this way, and then if they open up trading...
Oh, mate, that's the Wild West.
Then
I'd be a millionaire.
Yeah, then it all...
I'd be investing.
We'll move forward. Obviously, we'll continue to keep an eye on the marketplace beta. I'm sure you've signed up.
Yeah, I've signed up. I like genuinely, if the marketplace is actually decent and works well and it's popular, like I think I'm actually going to be like creating content and shit around it. Like I love this shit. So yes. So it'll be the same here.
So it'll be very fun. We'll keep an eye on that one. Moving forward with the rest of the updates. So the big one, the frag grenades. Obviously, we actually spoke about this in the last episode. The rumored changes have come true. You can no longer cook your frag grenades as an attacker. The initial fuse has come down a little bit to help with that, but yeah, ultimately you throw it. It takes a little bit of time and then it explodes. So in terms of vert play, that's been certainly nerfed for attack. And again, it goes back into that discussion we had earlier in terms of like attack and defense, that certainly is going to hinder attacking players. It's not as if it's completely dead. I mean, you made a point to me off air earlier that, you can maybe shoot the floorboard, for example, and then get it to get sort of stuck up there or whatever. So there are certainly things that I think pro players will be able to navigate and eventually unlock with the new changes. But in terms of like overnight, it's going to feel like a really big nerf straight away.
Yeah, I don't particularly hate this change, and I think that the designer notes stepped through quite well and reasonably why frag grenades had to be looked at. And they also actually listed like several other changes they tried. They tried things like a random fuse timer. They tried things like giving only one grenade, like all these ideas that pretty much we talked about or I had thought in my head. And they actually did a pretty decent job at outlining, why during the testing or prototyping of these, why they didn't land on them eventually. And I don't think frag grenades are dead in the water. You can still use them to flush out positions, clear utility. There's still, the ability to vert nade by shooting out and getting it lodged in the floor. I think that tech is still going to be available and may be used from time to time. So I don't think it's the absolute death of frag grenades. And the beauty of this change is the fact that there's now a bigger distribution. So you have like IQ frags and a couple of other operators getting as well, Lion. So I think it's good in that respect. One interesting analysis and like point of comparison I did see was actually from the Sonics analyst Joe, making the comparison between if frag grenades being an instant death is a player concern or issue, why is that not then translated across to nitro cells and the vertical potential from those? Now there are some flaws in the argument that I did see. The fact that you can better counter nitros, they have to be tossed and landed before you can detonate them, and there's that animation, etc. But I don't know, I thought it was an interesting discussion point.
I think for me is that nitro cells have that intent. The intent is you get one nitro cell and you try and find a kill. With frag grenades, you get a couple, and you also can use that to clear utility. So there's a little bit more of a versatile purpose to them. You can flush out of position, so it's not necessarily also just for getting the kill. So the fact that you can get a kill, flush out of position, or get rid of utility makes them so much, and you get more of them than a nitro cell. I think that's the difference between them. So I do see the point. I do get the idea that like, okay, well, if you're nerfing one thing that can get kills, what about the other thing? But the other thing is intended for that. That is the purpose of a nitro cell, is to get a kill. For frag grenades, that's not like the overall intent. It's just a feature, and a feature now that is nerfed, not removed, but nerfed. So it's you'll still catch some people off guard. And as I was saying to you off air as well, pro players will find like little nade lineups that they can sort of bounce off the wall to mean that when it does get to the point where it like gets to the location where they want it to blow up, it bounces off a wall. So that takes a bit of time, and then it gets there and it blows up, and you can still find a way to make those things happen. We'll move on because we're not strapped for time, but we're
waffling. We
have waffled a little bit. The mirror nerf as well has come through, so the mirror can be broken again by Ash's gadgets. So I don't know. I think mirror already, which used to be very, very strong, is now actually in a bit of a state where I don't know if it's really worth it. At this point, there's so many ways that you can kind of deal with the mirror now that is it really in a good position that you just keep kind of throwing it in the dumps? Like, this is another nerf, another operator that can deal with mirror. Do you even bother bringing it? Already in a meta that has a lot of really good defensive operators, mirror's probably going to fall down a peg or two with this.
Yeah, I mean, it's better. I think you're going to be bringing Fenrir or whatever if you want that information gathering capability. I guess it does still have some like specific stronghold positions, but if she gets spotted in prep phase, you'll just attack a repick onto Ash. So it's a pretty significant nerf for mirror. I don't hate it though. Mirror can be very oppressive and just shit to play against. So... not the end of the world. Yeah, probably just brings it more in line with others and becomes a bit of a pocket pick. Certain sites, certain maps, you might bring it out, but other than that, it's no longer going to be a must ban or pick it every time if you can. Maestro gets an extra Evil Eye, so from 2 to 3, which I think is a pretty handy change. We don't really see Maestro all that often. Do you think adding an extra eye is going to make him a little bit more prone to being picked? I mean, potentially, especially if we see like the Tubarão actually do a decent job at countering like super aggressive pushes. Maestro may actually now have the time to jump on cameras and make plays. It's interesting. Maestro also does take a little while to do his setup. You think 3 cameras, rotation holes as well with Bailiff. So I don't know if he's going to be particularly popular to play. He could have a spot though, maybe. I think it's going to depend though on what kind of attacking compositions we see going forward, which is tough to say right now because of the nade changes and stuff. So we'll wait and see, because we could see, I'm probably not expecting it, but we could see like 8 nade lineup setups in the future, even if they're not as strong. And if you're targeting Maestro cameras with the frag grenades, well, they're going to be taken out pretty easily. So I don't know, maybe, but I don't think Maestro is like shooting up to S tier anytime soon. No,
I don't think so. I think as strange as this sounds, I think it's just one extra gadget that actually maybe gets rid of some utility from the attacking team. That's it. Like if you've got to clear it, soaks a little bit more than usual. So as you said, it's not going to just shoot him up to the S tier overnight. Maybe there might be some niche Maestro players that are just going to be loving this change.
Could be good in some objectives, I guess, but
yeah. We'll see. And then lastly, our final topic from the season reveal: more maps added into quick match. So I mean, in terms of the casual player base, it's obviously very prominent, and I think you want to include the maps. The biggest thing about this season reveal, and I think really more this year in general, has been the focus on the casual play, on extra controller support that we've seen come through. Which again, for those maybe watching this that maybe unaware, but controller is the primary player base for this game.
Yep.
Console is the primary player base for this game, and casual is the primary player base for this game. So no surprise that they've done a lot of like onboarding and helping like casuals get into it. A lot more controller support, console support, adding in these maps now to quick match, and putting a lot of their emphasis and time in around that sort of casual experience for a reason. And I think then it puts them in a good position going into say 2024, where the onboarding is in a really good spot. The introductions and the tutorials and all of these things, the commendation system that they've added, all of this now puts it in a good position where maybe Ubisoft can then turn their focus a little bit more back towards like ranked and comp play and things and esports in 2024, because they've laid those foundations through this particular year with the grassroots, with these onboarding system changes. Obviously, they put a lot of emphasis on quick match. And one thing that you haven't actually added here, but also the removal of T-Hunt.
Ooh.
So that has certainly been controversial from some of the comments that we've read on YouTube, and I'm sure probably on Reddit as well. I think they've done so for a reason. Obviously, they've completely revamped the whole sort of AI experience, or the offline experience, if you will. And I think this was just like one of the last remnants of like the old sort of model. And obviously they've replaced it with new modes, better modes probably too. And speaking figuratively as well, having a mode called T-Hunt or Terrorist Hunt, probably not ideal. And I think that was probably the last straw for them. And obviously they changed that name officially a while ago, and now it's like the mode's just gone, so you no longer even call it that name. And and it helps, I think, them from a commercial aspect, and it means that they've got themselves now a good system overall for new players, beginner players, where they can go through, learn maps, do all of that. There's so many tools. You don't really need T-Hunt. And even from warm-up purposes, like you've got the training mode now, so you don't really need... I don't think you need it anymore. I think people will move on I think people will move on from T-Hunt a lot quicker than they realize.
Yeah, I don't think it's a one-for-one replacement at the moment, but especially with like the AI playlist, once there's more maps added to that, I don't think it's going to be particularly bad. And like, of most people, I'm like probably pretty biased invested. Like, I used to speed run the fucking situations which are getting removed, so like that's a little bit disappointing. But I mean, it is what it is. I don't think it's the end of the world. I think the tools are adequate enough as a replacement, and you have things like the shooting range now. And look, the people that are that hardcore into kind of warming up, especially on PC, they're using aim labs anyway. So I don't really buy it. People coming out and, you know, whinging and complaining over the top about this. It's really not, I don't think, the end of the world. It does hurt a bit, but I'm going to take the developers at their word. If this is taking away resources and time that could be better spent on other shit,
I don't know if I believe that one.
I don't know if I do fully.
Yeah.
I think maybe the way it was worded was a little bit strange, but I think they probably mean they more so take away resources that can be better invested into onboarding tools. So maybe not specifically warm-up tools, but yeah, I mean, it is what it is. I think the addition of AI playlists and these like learning the map, fucking whatever they called it, like running around and learning shit, I think is so sorely needed. And if that means we take a hit on T-Hunt, so be it, whatever.
To wrap on the season reveal, though, I'm going to say W. Are you going to say W?
Yeah, W.
Yeah, massive W. All right, big season reveal. Deep Freeze is coming our way, and should be a lot of fun. All right, moving on to our finals review for the Atlanta Major, our esports segment for the show. An all-Brazil finale in the end. And I think a finals that, look, maybe didn't have the peaks. It certainly, I don't think, like, you're not going to think back in a couple of years and be like, oh, how great was the Atlanta Major?
Nah, I mean, the only thing that's good about this event is that it sets up the W7M treble. Outside of that, you had no NA team make it to the grand final, no APAC teams in the finals. The viewership itself was not amazing, and you had a double region, Brazil of all regions, to be in the grand final. It just was the recipe to just be a pretty mid event, to be honest. The siege itself, and like the quality of the siege and the, you know, the creativity and the expression we're seeing inside of this event, great, probably the best of any event. But from a viewer spectacle perspective, I don't think it really hit the mark. And it wasn't even like the final was close. I predicted a W7M 3-0. It wasn't far off, 3-1 in the end. W7M are just far too powerful. Loss kind of jibbed their way a bit to the grand final.
Yeah.
Credit to them. I mean, they're a great team. Cameraman, storyline, amazing, etc. And we'll probably see them be stronger at SI. But yeah, unfortunately, as a whole, and as you kind of said, in 6 months' time, a year's time, no one's going to remember this event. Like, get real.
Nothing too crazy happened. I mean, even like trying to think of like what was the best match of the finals, and you probably have to just look at that FaZe Clan Space Station 3-mapper. I think a 7-5 on the third is the closest we had in terms of at least a close series.
NA team and whatever.
Yeah. So, GK Esports weren't out swinging, though. They got a map off of W7M, who were the eventual champions. The interesting thing for me, and this sucks, is that I would have loved to have seen GK play anyone else. They took a map off W7M. I mean, Lost obviously did get one map in the grand final, but what would have, say, a GK versus BDS looked like? A GK versus Dark Zero? Like, what would have that looked like? Would they have made the semi-final? Who knows? We won't know. But it does set them up, obviously, for 6 Invitational. Them, along with Falcons, I think, for MENA going into SI, I can't wait to see what those two teams can do. There's so much respect now on that region, on those teams, to the level that they're either at the same level as NA or close to it, very, very close. Like, I mean, at this point, I'd just say, I think those two teams, to the average of NA, are at that level.
Yeah,
probably.
I think that's
The
fair.
rest of the meta region, probably not, but those two teams in particular. So yeah, nothing too crazy happened in the quarterfinals. FaZe 2-1 over Space Station, probably the closest. Obviously, W7 and Geek8 also 2-1. Bit disappointing from Dark Zero. I think out of the finals, they were the one that probably dropped the bundle the most, right? To lose 2-0 to Lost 1. Obviously, in the end, Lost made it all the way to the grand final, but still, I think disappointing from them. Team BDS, did we expect them to put up a bit more of a fight against G2? I mean, you were saying G2's form coming into this particular finals run was really good, so I guess you wouldn't have been too surprised with them sort of running down BDS.
I think I put BDS in my top 3 to win, though, didn't I? I think I did.
Yeah,
So
we both did. We had W7M, BDS.
I will say I kind of corrected that last episode and probably predicted G2 to make it through all the way to the semis in a clean fashion. In fact, I said they could probably go on to win the grand final if they played well, and obviously they didn't in the semi. They went up to par. 2-0 over BDS. I wouldn't say it's particularly surprising given BDS's struggles over the last year or so, but probably a little bit disappointing for BDS.
7-2, 7-4, like not
it's
really
pretty
close.
Pretty one-sided.
Yeah.
It's good from G2. I think they'll be disappointed a little bit with that W7M game. They just never really got themselves into it. 7-2, 7-5 to W7M, so not even pushing OT. So I think G2 would probably chalk that down to a little bit of a disappointing tournament, but still semi-final. I mean, I saw them copying some flack on socials. I was like, get real. I mean, semis in a major is still pretty solid, especially this is a team that came through the LCQ. Like, give them a break.
Not a single overtime in the semi-finals, in the grand final. You have to go back to basically like FaZe Space Station. They had an 8-6. So again, that game was close. That was probably the only series.
No OTs in semis and grand finals kind of sucks.
That sucks. It means that obviously it's all a little bit one-sided. So look, in the end, congratulations to W7M. Well deserved. We both had them.
Yep.
It was our number one pick from the get-go before everything even started. And they did not let us down. So 2 in a row for them. Can they make it 3 at SI? I mean, if there were like a bookie's odds, they'd be the favorites.
Oh, they'd have to be.
And especially in Brazil.
I know.
Like,
you're going to have like 10,000 Brazilian fans like screaming for them, assuming they make the grand final. Could you imagine how, if you're a non-Brazilian team walking into that arena, you'd feel like you're walking into like execution room or something. Like, it would be so scary.
Yeah.
So if there's any team that's going to do it, I mean, W7 are insane. And look, major SI. I even saw a couple people on Twitter talking about it, right? And I know we did last week, and you especially are a big advocate. Will they walk away from SI if they win it as the best team to ever play the game?
You said they would need one more major to go 4 in a row.
And the reason I said that is because like the G2 Penta era was like they won 6 out of 8 tournaments. So that's pretty hard to beat. But I mean, the circumstances around this and the meta that we're in and how much higher the skill ceiling
from Brazil,
is.
which, you go back to
Plus the Brazil storyline.
You go back to that G2 Penta era, and Brazil wasn't where they are now, right? So
not really, no.
It's like, imagine in 3-4 years' time, an APAC team goes against 3 in a row. We're not in that timeline though.
Mate, it took us 8 years to get a caster to cast the fucking game. I made a tweet. I was like, give us another 8 and we might get a team there. Like, maybe.
Yeah. So a little bit disappointing, obviously, to close out the Atlanta major, but well deserved for W7M. And I think, sets. I think I will say the one thing about the Atlanta major, it set us up really nicely for SI. I think there's a lot of storylines that have been developed nicely at the major. So all the teams that have obviously qualified got their extra points. We've got our 20 teams, the MENA region, a couple of teams from APAC, the likes of Bliss, for example, all kind of doing okay here at the earlier stages of this tournament. Now it's like, okay, can you build on that? What can you do at SI? So very curious to see what's going to happen there. And I think that was certainly one of the benefits to close out the Atlanta major. Overall, our predictions were pretty spot on. And yeah, the last thing from it though, and I think you pointed this out, so much consulate.
Yeah.
So much consulate.
I can very quickly double check now, but did it end up being the most picked? So yeah, it did.
Yeah.
7. So out of 108 maps picked at the major, it was picked 17 times, which was the most. 10 in the major and 7 in the major playoffs. So for everyone that saw Consulate and was like, this is a shit map, I don't want to play it, it's crap. Well, it was the most fucking played at the major, so shut up.
Second most, and this is probably a little bit more surprising for me, second most defender-sided map was Consulate 2 at 61.8%. So, I think also the reason why I say that is because it's beaten out the likes of Clubhouse, Oregon, the most defender side, basically 68%.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Even Skyscraper, I would have thought maybe would have beaten out Consulate, and the likes of Cafe, for example. But yeah, the big thing for me was also Border just didn't really get played, which I think I like Border. You know, it's a fun sort of frag heavy map. You can.
Well, but Jake, I hate Siege. It's too defender sided. Why would we go to the 60% attacker sided map? I will say Border without Vertnades, and I made a joke to Oda about this. I was like, because he made some tweet, I can't remember what it was, and I was like, oh, Border out of the rotation, because you know how notorious they were for hitting Vertnades on that map.
Yeah.
I do wonder how much that number's going to shift with the nade nerf. I think that we could see Border probably closer to 50-50.
Yeah, besides Border, the only other attacking sided map was Chalet by a measly 1.2%. It was at 51% attacker sided, so that was the only one that was even remotely close to 50-50. Night Heaven Labs, I thought actually, very close to 50-50 as well, so that's not too bad, and got played a pretty decent amount. They actually all got played a pretty decent amount, except for Border. Yeah. So I'm not sure what that means. I don't know what maps you would look at sort of removing or changing.
Cafe, pool. Get it out.
I guess Cafe is probably one of them. I don't know if that's down to the statistics. I think that's just more to it's been around for so long. Let's get rid of it, move on, get something a bit different. Yep. Do you think they would ever get rid of like Oregon Club? Like they're big staples, right? They've been around such a long time. I think they still play quite well. Obviously, they play very same. Like the rest of the pool, I think is good. I like Bank. I think Border's good. Chalet, I think is a good map. Consulate's obviously just come back in. Cafe, you get rid of. Labs is new, and Skyscraper, I think, is still new enough. So it's kind of like of the maps that you would look at changing in the near future. Oregon, Cafe, and Club, I think, are the three that are most prominent to be looked at.
Yeah, I would agree. I think those top three.
Would you get rid of those two? I think obviously Cafe at this point people are like sick of it, but Oregon Club, would they be on the firing line?
Yeah, I think they'll be on the chopping block within 24 months for sure. But again, we need to see where this attack defender meta is kind of developing. I think of all the maps that are going to be severely impacted by like this new operator and the frag changes alone, it's probably Clubhouse. Like we could see that dramatically shift one way or the other depending on how teams shape up on it. So I don't know. The other question is like, what maps do you replace it with? Lair is probably the only map waiting in the wings that's good enough, I think, right?
Yeah, maybe.
So I mean, pending other reworks, but yeah,
I think it probably just. I mean, it depends on how many maps they want to change in and out, right?
Do we go back to 7 maps? That's the other question.
Yeah,
save that for another day.
It's as simple as just Cafe out, Lair in, call it a day. We'll see. Very last topic, and we'll close the show. Double Brazil Grand Final for the major. Obviously, also going to be completely honest, 2 Brazilian organizations that are not like as massive as like your Phases or your Liquids had it. And this is a thing where it's like the question is double Brazil. It's like also got to add that caveat, because had it been Liquid and Phase, and both were at their peaks, and you know, like that kind of grand final, I think would be fine. But because it's like 2 of the like lesser orgs globally, along with then an all Brazil grand final, in terms of its impact on the viewership, do you think it had an impact?
Yeah, I would very much. Yeah, I mean, looking at the numbers, it would have an impact. I think the overall peak of the event was, I think it ended up being just shy of Copenhagen in the end. Now, I don't know what other extraneous factors, I don't know what other events run at the time or whatever, so it could also be that. But I just think that any grand final that has 2 teams from the same region, especially, you know, a more minor region, you know, outside of NA or EU, it's always going to hurt viewership. Like if you're an EU fan, for example, and you're like sitting on the fence about watching the game and you kind of have to stay up a bit later for it, or especially APAC, it was like a 7 a.m. game. I only watched the first map live because it was that fucking early and I stayed up. If it's 2 Brazil teams, I don't think a lot of people are going to care enough to watch it. Now, if W7M go on to, you know, really lean into this whole villain arc, they get the treble, they're like the best team, they have this kind of G2 resurgence era, we might see more people start to care a little bit more, and the viewership reflect that. But I think at the moment, we continue to see these Brazil grand finals just not perform very well.
Yeah. One thing I'd love for SI, a grand final, W7M versus like a BDS or something
like a G2.
Like that, or a G2.
G2, W7M, that would be insane.
Can they stop the run? It would be like EU v Brazil. I think that's the dream, right? I think an EU Brazil SI grand final.
Alamau. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
That'd be the perfect grand final.
That'd be and it would really, I think, also set in motion then 2024 and the major to follow and the next.
Just don't be double Brazil.
Yeah.
I know it's a Brazil home crowd, but having 2 would actually probably water that down. Like, just imagine like a W7M G2, like
in
the
the
crowd
stadium,
getting in on Alabama,
in the stadium.
10,000 in the stadium. Holy shit!
But then back home, everyone watching EU would be all like, "Can we beat them? Can we take them down?" So from home, it'd be fucking amazing, and it would set up the next couple of majors and the next SI after that. So it'd be great.
Yep.
All right, we'll close it on that episode 14 for the Siege show. I don't know what the future's going to be because we do go into a little bit of an off season now. There's no SI quals. So there's nothing until 6 Invitational, so a couple of months now. So I don't know what the episode structures will look like. Please
just farm some drama.
Yeah,
farm some drama.
Keep an update, obviously, on all of the socials. If you want to join the Discord, of course, we've restructured the Patreon link up above. If you want to join, get involved, obviously, it's continuing to build a good little community over there. Much love and a big thank you to everyone watching. Make sure you hit that subscribe button so you will be notified, of course, when our episodes do go live. And hopefully, we'll see you when we see you. Much love. Take care.